We recently got a teaser for DLC 3, this map that's set in the Mansion. But in the very first teaser we got to this confirmed something that a lot of us had been suspecting for a while now. Because what we saw was the outside of this mansion. And for the keen-eyed people, they noticed this looks very similar to something that we actually saw in the final cutscene to the Modern Warfare Zombies story. Which, yes, by the way, it is canon and all connected to this story too. But for the people who are unfamiliar with this ending cutscene, this is where everything was seemingly wrapped up. The entity was defeated, and now Dr. Jansen was just trying to figure out more about what happened in the past, and this brought her to Liberty Falls. And while she was at Liberty Falls, she was grabbed and then taken into what seems like the Dark Ether. But the thing that grabbed her was kind of shown before it grabbed her, outside of just the hand that we saw. Because here for a second, we see this shadowy figure, and this is where it all ties in. Because if you look at the background of this shadowy figure and compare it to the mansion itself, I mean, it's identical. You see the round thing, the chimneys, it all matches up almost perfectly. So this is telling us that this dark figure is some way connected to the mansion. Now, one thing to point out is that if this dark figure is in the Dark Ether, why is the mansion in the Dark Ether? That is a huge question, because currently what we've seen inside of the game so far, the mansion is obviously not in the Dark Ether. So this means one of a few things. That rather some way, somehow, the mansion that we see in our map at the end of DLC 3 is somehow going to get dragged into the Dark Ether, something crazy like that. Or potentially more interesting one is that this Shem and his occult, which I've made a video on that you guys could check out that is very interesting, maybe when he was talking to potentially even this dark figure from the Dark Ether, he was directing him to build this mansion in the same way that the one was built in the Dark Ether. That would also be pretty cool. Or potentially this dark figure is just not even in the Dark Ether and he's just at the mansion. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here. But regardless of where it is, we do know that this shadowy figure does have Dr. Jansen. But the question is, why does this dark figure even want Dr. Jansen? Well, for the people who didn't keep up with the Modern Warfare story, it actually turns out that Dr. Jansen is the biological daughter of Samantha Maxis. Now, there was a whole weird thing that went on with how she was actually born that I'm not getting into, but just know for now that she is the biological daughter of her, and because of that, she does have some of the similar Dark Ether powers that Samantha Maxis does have, which is very interesting. So what it seems like is what's going on here is the reason why this shadowy figure wants Dr. Jansen is because of that connection to Samantha Maxis. And maybe for some reason this dark figure can't get Samantha Maxis herself, so instead it's going for the next best thing, which is obviously her biological daughter. But we can't just keep going around talking about this dark figure and not even speculate on who this is, because we kinda actually know who this is. And I know on first glance, when you look at this shadowy figure and the hat that it's wearing, everybody immediately wants to say it's the Shadowman, and kinda maybe, but what we've actually learned through the story of Modern Warfare Zombies is that this is actually not the Shadowman, but instead is the Shadowsmiths. Now, the problem with talking about these Shadowsmiths is that we know very, very little about them. Like, all we really know is that they were a dark figure in the background of the Modern Warfare story that really wasn't explained. All we really learned is that the entity from that Dark Ether story wasn't actually the main enemy like we thought the whole time. By the end of it, we learned that that entity was trying to protect Dr. Jansen from these exact Shadowsmiths. But because we defeated her and the entity is probably dead, now the Shadowsmiths had nobody to stop them from getting Jansen, and that's exactly what they did. That's what we saw. And as we've already gone over why the Shadowsmiths want Jansen because of the connection to Samantha Maxis, I mean, the reason why they want that power, I mean, it could just be because she's powerful and they want power, right? But I mean, I guess I have to mention the fact that there are some rumors about the Shadowsmiths being potentially the main villain-ish thing for not this Black Ops 6 zombie story, but for the story after this in Call of Duty 2025. Now, I'm not going to get into that because that's a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors that I'm just not comfortable talking about, but I thought it was something that I should at least mention. But to be fair, it would make sense because COD 2025 is rumored to be a sequel to Black Ops 2, which Black Ops 2 took place in 2025, our current year, and Modern Warfare Zombies was taking place in modern day, so you know it all ties in. But regardless of that fact, I do have to say something that, I mean, it's just kind of obvious at this point because like look at this shadowy figure, look at these Shadowsmiths, look at their name, they're called the Shadowsmiths. Like everything about them is screaming Shadowman. And I mean, I feel like there has to be some connection because keep in mind, at the end of the original story, the Ether story, everything was thrown into the Dark Ether. That included the Shadowman. So what if after spending millennia in there, he just became the Shadowsmiths instead? Maybe split into multiple beings and now he's a Shadowsmith. Or potentially, what if these are followers of the Shadowman and the Shadowman's really at the control of all of these guys, but it's the Shadowsmiths that he's sending out to do his bidding? It could be something like that. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities, but I refuse to believe that these have zero connection to the Shadowman. And honestly, if the Shadowman returns, I would be so happy. I believe he is the best villain that we've ever had in the zombie storyline, but was so underutilized, and I would love to see him return. But that's everything I really wanted to go over with this one, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on everything we've talked about, from the Shadowsmith, the Shadowman, Dr. Jansen, COD 2025, whatever it may be. What do you think about all of this? But regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.